Good evening and welcome to a very special edition of the Stu Peters Show. There are very few political organizations in this country and in this world today with as much power as the Anti-Defamation League, also known as the ADL. The Jewish supremacist so-called civil society group that openly supports the systematic censorship of American citizens and the flooding of America's borders with murderous third world savages and the castration of America's children and so much more. If you name a cause that I fight against on this show, then I can promise you that in one way or another, the ADL is supporting it. As a matter of fact, the ADL and their associates have repeatedly called for this network to be censored and to be taken off the air entirely. These people have been publishing articles about me for years now trying to shut this show down. There's even an entire page dedicated to Stu Peters at adl.org, trying to put a muzzle on the truth. And it's not just me. It's not just the Stu Peters Show. It's not just the Stu Peters Network. The ADL will go after anyone, and they do. So where did the ADL come from exactly, and why are they so powerful? How did they get here? Well, what if I told you that the ADL was founded in 1913 for the express purpose of defending a Jewish child rapist and murderer called Leo Frank? Frank was the superintendent at the National Pencil Company in Atlanta, Georgia. He was also part owner of the factory where they manufactured pencils and utilized child labor. One of these children was a 13-year-old girl called Mary Phagan, and on the morning of April 27, 1913, Mary Phagan was found dead. She was brutally murdered. She was raped. She was left in the basement of that pencil factory like a piece of garbage. Police said that she was likely raped and murdered the night before, quickly launched this large-scale investigation into what was then and now an unspeakable, grotesque crime only committed by the sickest and most disgusting demons that walk among us. Eventually, the police found their man. That man was Leo Frank. Frank was indicted by a grand jury, which included 4 of his fellow Jews, by the way, and then he was put on trial. He was convicted of rape, he was convicted of the murder of Mary Phagan, and he was sentenced to death, only for immense Jewish financial and political pressure to lead Georgia's then-governor John Slayton to commuting Frank's sentence to life in prison in 1915. And as a result, understandably so, Georgians were enraged. A mob formed. They broke Leo Frank out of prison, they took him to Mary Phagan's hometown of Marietta, and they hanged him from a tree until dead. That's the official Orthodox narrative, and that was the end of Leo Frank, the child-killing pedophile, or at least it should have been. Now remember, this case is the entire reason why the ADL even exists. Jonathan Greenblatt and the rest of his cronies are the modern-day acolytes of a child-killing pedophile who they have vowed to protect and never forget. The ADL was founded to protect a Jewish child rapist from justice. And not just that, but to pin the crime on a black man in Jim Crow-era Georgia, where that black man would have almost certainly met death if wrongfully convicted, or if he pissed off the townspeople and decided to take matters into their own hands before he could even stand trial, which, let's be honest, was known to happen at that time. But Leo Frank didn't care. And neither did his Jew lawyers. They didn't need locals to believe them. They just needed the cash to keep flowing in. They needed northern Jewish journalists to keep flooding into Georgia to turn the man who raped and murdered a 13-year-old girl into the ultimate victim, a victim of anti-Semitism. And they needed this newly formed pressure group called the ADL to help them do it. Jews all over the country, whether they knew anything about the case or not, pumped money into the ADL in the name of Leo Frank and gave birth to one of the most subversive organizations that this country has ever seen. They didn't care that a little girl had been raped and murdered. They didn't care that even the Ku Klux Klan was saying, hey, the black guy didn't do it. No, all they cared about was getting Leo Frank off. Because if you're an American, whether you're black or you're white, These Jews just look at you like a piece of human cargo, someone who can be bussed all around the country and eventually all around the world as a source of cheap labor and who can be used as the fall guy or as the human sacrifice if it ever comes to that. So what skin was it off of Leo Frank's back if some stupid goy had to die in his place? Leo Frank didn't care. Just as he didn't care about the life of little Mary Phagan. Now look, this case has a massively disproportionate impact on the direction of our country. The ADL used its defense of a child-killing Jewish pedophile as a launch pad to become involved in the judicial and political matters of the United States in a way that Jews had never seen before. Fast forward to today, think of all that the ADL is known for, and then make the connection in your own head. The Anti-Defamation League, which makes its money defaming non-Jews, by the way, is working around the clock to control your speech, to get you kicked off of the internet if you even dare to question them or question their tribe or any one of their associates or pet projects. Yeah, because they hate you and they want to control you. And they only exist because they genuinely do not care if Gentiles live or die. As a matter of fact, they would prefer that you die. They don't care if you get raped or don't get raped or get blamed for Jewish crimes or don't get blamed. The list goes on and on. These people are literal demons. Put up the picture. Just look at Leo Frank. Look at how disgusting he was. If he were alive today, he would be making millions of dollars being typecast as a pedophile in Hollywood movies. That disgusting, perverted face was the last thing that a little 13-year-old innocent girl called Mary Phagan saw on this earth as Leo Frank raped her and strangled the life out of her. A tragedy that can't even be described. But the American people haven't forgotten about Mary Phagan. We most certainly here at the Stu Peters Network and across the board, we haven't forgotten about Mary Phagan. And in that vein, for the next hour on this very special edition of the Stu Peters Show, we have the honor of being joined by a very special guest who can provide us with some very unique insight on this entire story. So with that said, we're now honored to be joined by Mary Phagan-Kean, the namesake niece of the little girl that was murdered at that National Pencil Company factory in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1913. Mary Phagan-Kean, welcome to the Stu Peters Show. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
What made you decide that you would take this interview? Because I don't see you running around taking interviews, and I don't see you on social media, making a big stink. I mean, you barely have a following at all on X. What made you decide to come here today and talk with us?
We have former governor, Roy Barnes, and a Rabbi, Steve LeBeau from Cobb County, who are working with the Fulton County DA, Fonnie Willis, who, as you are well aware of, also did Trump. And they are trying to exonerate Leo Frank through the Innocence Project. And that's why I agreed to do this podcast, because I think people outside of Georgia now need to know what is really happening and how it happened and how it started. And they need to hear the truth about what they're doing. So honestly, I could go back to however far back you want me to. I can go when I turned 13 when I found out. I can go back to 82 when it really started heavily. And then I can go to the current now. I mean, things have happened almost every single year. I have scrapbooks and information and memorabilia from 1977. I have 57 years worth of materials at this point.
I just want you to talk to, you have carte blanche here. I just want you to talk to our audience. I mean, you can bullet point what I said, what I referenced in the monologue. You can talk about where this all started, and you can talk about why it is so important that we shed light on this and what an exoneration of Leo Frank would do to this country.
Okay, well, it started for me when I was 13. My dad was in the Air Force, so I'm a military brat, and we traveled a lot. And I was 13 in South Carolina, and Mr. Henry, my science teacher, lined us all up and looked at this paper, and that was it, and checked us off. Well, when I came through the line, Not only did he stop, he put his pencil down and he looked up at me and he said, Mary Phagan. He said, there was a little girl that was murdered in Atlanta in 1920. Are you related to her? And I said, I don't know. And so after that, you got to remember, I'm 13. Ironically, that is the age that Mary was murdered. 13. So I'm 13, and the boys are teasing me, saying that I was reincarnated and I was the dead girl, little Mary Phagan. Totally distraught. You got to remember, 13 years old, you don't hear things like that. So I cried all the way home, and my father happened to be home because he was always gone. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Henry says there was a little girl named Mary Phagan who was murdered in Atlanta in 1913, and he wanted to know if I was related. Am I related? My dad turned, he didn't say a word. He was just awestruck. He said, you need to sit down. So he sat me down, got me a glass of milk, and he said, tomorrow I want you to go back to school and tell Mr. Henry that yes, indeed, you are related to little Mary Phagan, and that you are I named you after her, and it was your grandfather's sister, little sister. I think you need to know that the family didn't discuss it. My dad had been married to my mother for 14 years, and she never heard about Mary Phagan, excuse me. Um, she never heard about the story of Mary Phagan either. It was something that was not to be discussed by our great grandmother, Fanny Phagan Coleman. So that's how I found out. Well, I went back to school, of course, and said I was related. Then I was 13. I knew I would never be asked that question again. I knew it. Well, Dad decided to move our family to Atlanta to be with our grandparents so that we can know our grandparents because my growing up years were overseas in Japan and Hawaii. So we had no family around us, just the military family. So we went back to South Carolina. We went back to Atlanta. He said, we need to know our grandfather and our grandmothers. So we went the first day of school at Shamrock High School. All 6 of my teachers asked me if I was related to little Mary Phagan. And I said, yes. I went home and I said to Daddy, there's more to this case than you're telling me because everybody asked me that question. What's going on? So basically, he told me that, Leo Frank was a sexual pervert. That's the term that he used. I did not know what a sexual pervert was at 13 and 15. I had no idea, no clue. That he was a sexual pervert and that he raped Mary horribly. And she was found murdered in the basement of the pencil factory. And that he was convicted of the murder, and a vigilance committee, after Governor Slayton commuted his sentence on his last day in office, that people aren't aware of, that he commuted the sentence from death to life imprisonment. Well, of course, like you said earlier, a group of people, they were not a mob. I want people to be aware of that. They were very well known Marietta citizens. Streets in Marietta are named after these people. They are very powerful people, and they still are today. And they were the group that took a vow of silence that they would never discuss any of this with anybody. And it didn't come out until later on in my years when I would introduce myself to people as Mary Phagan. They would say, oh, my father or my uncle or somebody was part of the group that lynched Leo Frank. And I'd go back home and I'd write it down in a notebook and all that. So I was just hearing it through hearsay because people really didn't know I existed. And we just, I grew up overseas, so it was just nothing that I could do. Well, again, I went on a search. My daddy told me, he said, you need to go to the libraries, you do whatever you need to do to go search. I want you to do it on your own. I do not only want you to hear your oral history, but I want you to read it, what other people are saying about it as well. And I said, yes, sir. So I did. And the first time Mother and I went to the Georgia State Archives, I'm not kidding, Mr. Peters, there was a huge, I can't tell you, maybe 6'7" of the lynching of Leo Frank as we entered that building. I had never seen the picture of the lynching, and I was very distraught. I was very upset. My mom was very upset. So I did a lot of research, and since that day, I have been doing research. Then every summer when I turned 15, 16, and 17, Daddy and I went to Georgia State Archives, and we went and reproduced all the documents that we wanted. So I have the original newspaper articles. Like, for example, I felt Jim Conley's testimony was very important. I wanted to see what the courtroom scenes were like because there had been so many rumors that they were yelling, "Hang the Jew," and all this stuff out there. There was mobs out there. Never, never happened. However, today they are still promoting those hoaxes and the propaganda. And mainly it's Governor Barnes, the ADL, and the rabbi that continue to promote these. They have no evidence to show any of this as factual. So I kept all that stuff, and then I just started doing things. And then 1982 was a big year for us and our family.
As Christians in a Christian country, we have a right to be, at minimum, agnostic about the leadership being all Jewishly occupied.
We literally should be at war with fucking Israel 100 times over, and instead we're just sending them money, and it's fucking craziness.
Look at the state of Israel, look at the state of Tel Aviv, and look at the state of Philadelphia. You tell me where this money's going. You tell me who's benefiting from this.
I am prepared to die in the battle, fighting this monstrosity that would wish to enslave me and my family and steal away any rights to my property and to take away my God. Go fuck yourself. Will I submit to that?
And if you've got a foreign state, you've got dual citizens in your government, who do you think they're supporting?
God, right now, would you protect the nation of Israel and protect those of us, not just our church, but every church in the world and in this nation that's willing to put their neck on the line and say, we stand with them.
You go look at Trump's cabinet, you look at Biden's cabinet, it's full of Jews.
I have a black friend in school. I have nothing against blacks. She has nothing against me. She understands where I'm coming from.
Excuse me, I'm a Jew, and I just like to say that, you know, in our Bible it says that you're like animals.
The Jews crucified our God.
If you work out, if you go to the gym, if you're trying to drop some body fat, maybe put on some lean muscle, if you're even just a little bit paying attention to your physical fitness, chances are you're probably taking a protein supplement. Back in the 80s, all of these supplement companies told us you gotta have more protein. They started pushing this massive protein consumption theory. The more protein you have, the faster you'll achieve muscle growth and muscle mass. So let's break that down. Let's just say that you have an 8-ounce chicken breast. That means that you're consuming about 40 grams of protein. You're putting it in your mouth. But just because something contains 40 grams of protein and you put it in your mouth and swallow it, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to absorb all 40 grams, because without enzymes, most of that protein just ends up in your toilet bowl. Your small intestine can only absorb protein that's been broken down into what we call amino acids. So it doesn't matter. You can have 300 grams of protein a day. If you don't have a sufficient supply of enzymes to digest that protein, your muscles will just ignore it, fight it off. They'll starve of protein. So it's crucial that you have a high quality enzyme. Now, before you just go running out buying bottles of enzymes, I think it's important that you know what to look for, because the sad truth is a lot of these supplement companies won't spend the money necessary to developing and stabilizing these enzymes. So the one I trust is from Bioptimizers, and it's called Masszymes. I love it because it's a full spectrum enzyme formula with more protease than any other commercially available enzyme, with 5 different kinds of protease. Plus it contains all of the enzymes that you need for optimal digestion. If your digestion is optimized, the protein that you're taking in actually goes to feed your muscles instead of going into the toilet bowl. So you're actually getting your money's worth. And today you can try it risk-free. They have a 365-day full money-back guarantee. That's the gold standard in the industry. If you want to try it, go to buyoptimizers.com/StuPeters. Again, that's buyoptimizers.com/StuPeters. And by the way, if you want 10% off, my good friends at Buyoptimizers have offered that to you. Just use the coupon code StuPeters at checkout when you go to buyoptimizers.com/StuPeters.
1982, a secretary named Sue Youngblood called me. I'm a former educator, so I taught students that were visually impaired and deafblind. So she called me and said, Mary, there's a big thing on the news today about Mary Phagan. I said, what do you mean? She said, they said, tune in to something, something. So I tuned in, and they said that this man that was an office boy, an Alonzo man, saw Jim Conley with the body of Mary Phagan, and he felt that Leo Frank was innocent of the murder of Mary Phagan. And so, I mean, the Jewish communities in Atlanta and Marietta, the ADL, the American Jewish Community, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but there was 3 of them, and they decided that they were going to make a case of it and use this as a way to get Leo Frank a pardon for the murder of my great aunt, little Mary Phagan. So this was very hard, but the elder Phagans, of course, were very upset, and they were still alive at this time. And my grandmother was alive, which was my grandfather's wife, and they didn't want to talk about it. Nope. Couldn't talk to him about it. Could never talk about it. My grandfather could never tell me the story of little Mary Phagan, ever. He would just break down and bring the picture and say that I looked like her. And I never, he just couldn't do it. I still get emotional at times as well. And, that part to me was very emotional when he brought me out her picture.
What was the justification for the pardon in the first place? I mean, Leo Frank was convicted of raping and killing Mary Phagan. So what was the justification for seeking a pardon?
They wanted a pardon for the murder, that he was not guilty. That's what they wanted. And at the time, they were looking at avenues to do that. One was to go through the Georgia governor. Georgia governor at the time could not do it. It had to go through what they call the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Board. That's who decides who gets a pardon or not in our state. And there was typically 4 ways that you could get a pardon here in Georgia. Ironically, he didn't meet any of them. But because of the, how do you want to say, you've already said it, the influence of the groups that were promoting all this, they agreed to take the case. However, I want you to know that the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Board did not know that the Phagan family existed or that I existed even. I talked to my elders and said, I want to go and I want to call them and tell them that we are here and that they need to know the generational trauma that they are continuing since 1913. And so I did. I called Mike Wing of the board, and he thought I was a joke. He didn't believe I was Mary Phagan. He just started laughing, and he was trying to hang up. And I said, no, sir, you don't understand. I'm Mary Phagan. I'm the great niece and namesake. Well, we were told there were no Phagans around. I said, well, that's not true. I'm here. And I want to know if I can find out when they apply for a pardon so that I would know, because everything, what the American people need to know is everything they do is in secret. Even what they're doing today, trying to do today, was a secret meeting that they had in order to try to exonerate him today. Everything was done in secret. So they met in secret. And I got the message from Mr. Wing about a year later that they have applied for it. They were not taking people to interviews. They were not going to do any of this. And it was based on Alonzo Mann's testimony that he saw Jim Conley with the body of Mary Phagan on the 2nd floor instead of the elevator. And that was the whole thing that they were doing. That he proved that Leo Frank was innocent by that. Alonzo Mann also made some very disturbing comments. He said he promoted himself as well, that there were mobs out there hang the Jew and all this stuff, and he was only 13 himself, and he was afraid to go home and tell his parents, and they told him not to do it and all this stuff. So that's what his story was all about. In 1983 or 82, the board did agree to have my father and I come and speak, which we were very pleased that happened, that they were willing to at least acknowledge that we existed. And they were very kind, they were very gracious. And I want you to know, and I want the world to know, that my family said at that meeting, and my daddy said at that meeting, that if Leo Frank is innocent, we would be, based on evidence, we would be willing to go forth to the world and say that he was innocent of the murder of Phagan if they had proof that it existed. Well, they didn't have any proof. They're just repeating the same things that have been going on for 110 years now. So that's what we did. And the next thing we knew, in 1983, in December, they denied the pardon to Leo Frank, and it created a storm here in Atlanta. It was something. It's just very hard to live through again, to be honest with you.
Can you describe what
it's not very good memories.
Of course not. Can you describe what that, you described it as a storm. Can you detail what that looked like?
Well, newspapers everywhere, newspaper articles everywhere, radio, everything, TV. I mean, it was just everywhere. It went worldwide. It went everything. They just kept saying that, Georgia has failed Leo Frank and all this. And that he was innocent, and that, he should have been given a pardon. And of course, our governor at the time, Joe Frank Harris, which I think is interesting too. This part is interesting. He said that he received thousands of letters regarding economic boycotts in Georgia if they didn't pardon him. I went in 2019 to the state archives and got all of the governor's letters and everything. He had 76 letters, and only one mentioned economic boycott in Georgia. So they're hiding all the information from everybody. And today they still are. They've censored me too, Mr. Peters. You're not the only one. I've been censored. My website's been attacked horrendously. I have several websites. I mean, they won't give up. They're just, trying to, but they have not been able to shut us down at this point. But they've censored several things. They have destroyed materials, so they don't want people to have access to it. I'm not sure if you knew, but the original transcript was either stolen or destroyed in 1965 when Leonard Dennerstein, who was writing his thesis book, and when Harry Golden, A Little Girl is Dead, was written. Those materials disappeared and nobody knows where there is. There is no trial transcript of Leo Frank case anymore. It's what they call a brief of evidence. And I have that in my collection. That's what I studied. And so that helped a lot. So it was just a storm of how could they do this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, here comes the secret part again. So they decided as a group, that whole board, even though they were very receptive to us, they met in secret and they worked with a young man from Florida State University named Clark Freshman, who was doing a thesis about how he could get a pardon for Leo Frank. And they let him come in, but they refused me records, which is interesting. So he was able to take this research, and they came up without addressing his guilt or innocence. And that's what they did in 1986. But that's not what the Jewish community does. The Jewish community tells you he was given a posthumous pardon. End of subject. It does not say without addressing his guilt or innocence, which would happen. So let me take you back to 1994, forward to 1994. The rabbi gets up in front of everybody because the Marietta City Cemetery is deciding to put historical markers throughout the cemetery. Well, can you guess whose grave is the most visited in the cemetery? Who? Little Mary Phagan. And they wanted to put a marker. My dad said, no, she doesn't need a marker. She's got a beautiful stone. She doesn't need it. And, my dad was fearful, to be honest, that somebody would destroy it, because it's a white marble stone. And he said, no, we don't want to do it. But the mayor, Joe Mack Wilson, called my dad and said that we will give you approval. We will let you draft it. You can help write it. You can approve it if you put it up there. We really think that she needs to have a marker. My dad said, I'm having a hard time with this. Everybody knows where her grave is. It doesn't matter. She doesn't need a marker. So finally, the family talked, and we decided that we would put the marker up, and he approved the marker. In 1995, the rabbi gets up in a meeting and demands that the marker that's put up at Mary's grave be taken down because it is offensive to the Jewish community. Because it did say at the end of the marker, he was issued a pardon without addressing his guilt or innocence. All right? About a couple months later, I go and do the cleaning, and the sign is changed. They changed the marker clandestinely in the middle of the night. I have a newspaper article. By the way, you guys need to know that I'm doing a revision of my book and it's coming out this year. So I'm calling them out. I'm telling everything that has happened now. People need to know
Good.
how cruel they are and how disrespectful they are to our family. And that's what I feel the rabbi and the governor are very disrespectful. They could care less. So they changed the marker to change it, to say at the end of the marker, he was issued a pardon. That is bamboozling the public. It sounds like Leo Frank was given the pardon for her murder.
But that's what these people do.
Yes.
And, you said they couldn't care less. I disagree. I think they care tremendously. And, we could talk about semantics, but I think you understand what I'm saying. And I think they care tremendously because I think that, this is central to the plight of the American people, and the oppression and the censorship that we have seen is being able to point back at historic events, whether it be the murder and rape of Mary Phagan, for which a Jewish pedophile was convicted and found guilty in a fair judicial system, in a jury trial by a group of his peers. Okay. Right. And now they want to remove the semblance of justice unilaterally and then run PR campaigns on the blood and on the death and on the back of the rape of that 13-year-old little girl.
Right. And they have smeared Mary Phagan as well. Several new books. It's real interesting. I have a library, an extensive library of almost every single book that's written on the case. And I've read every single one. And I can go through every single one and I could tell you page numbers of where they promote tons of hoaxes. I mean, there's just tons of them. There's like 10 or 12 that are really stand out to the American people. Anti-Semitism, mobs, hang the Jew, or we'll hang you, never happened. Steve Oney confirmed that in 2003, who was the expert for the ADL, but they never say that in today's world. They never say that no. Now they're changing the tactic to say
I think we should talk about today's world and the impact that the death of Mary Phagan had on the world, and why this tremendous injustice and basically PSYOP, this psychological operation, and the bald-faced lies that are being told on the back of her tragic death, that we're going to write the record. But I want to talk about why that's so important when we come back with Mary Phagan-Kean. Stick around. $31 off your annual subscription if you want to become a part of Stu Crew, to help to sharpen our iron to be the most important part of the most effective weapon in all of media. Support us right now with an annual membership. To celebrate my birthday, $31 off annual memberships at stupeters.com. So we just got to get down to brass tacks here. That's what we have to do. Donald Trump, AIPAC's $250 million baby, has just announced that he's going to primary Thomas Massie. The only guy in our entire Congress that hasn't taken $1 from Israel and from AIPAC and from these Jews. Thomas Massie. So all of the dissent is now going to be silenced. That's what this is. This is paving the road to get rid of any kind of obstruction or roadblock that may be in the way to slow down the progress of this weaponized uniparty duopoly that does the bidding of a foreign secular nation state, and all of the ills that come along with that are rushing in your direction. People like Thomas Massie, they were standing in the way. And now the $250 million that they have paid for this administration is starting to bear fruit. So can you survive? Let's ask Carlos Cortez, who joins us now from Cortez Wealth Management. Can Americans survive the economic onslaught that is rushing our direction by a foreign nation state?
You know, it creates an opportunity. Thanks for having me, Stu.
Yeah, of
for the
course.
Money Minute. It creates a huge opportunity to reposition your assets and make money off of this downfall. We are collectively in a market territory correction, and it's time. It's time to open up the playbook. It's time to not just sit anymore and do nothing. I mean, that is a cardinal sin, is passivity. And so what we have a huge opportunity is to short the markets, to take advantage of this downfall, to take advantage of the S&P hitting a new direction. The bull market has ended. We are going into a negative territory, and it's now time to clean house, to protect us from this crazy financial manipulation inoculation that is happening on Wall Street right now.
Well, the overtaken and conquered Occupy Uniparty is definitely cleaning house, and they're signaling that they're going to do that. And so now we need to clean house because we have work to do inside of our own camp, and everybody has work to do inside of their own home, inside of their own family, inside of their own community, inside of their own investment portfolio, inside of their own savings, inside of their own wallet. And if you want to protect everything that you have worked hard for, you got to go to CortezWM.com. That is the website where you're going to find this guy right here, Carlos Cortez of Cortez Wealth Management, an independent fiduciary that thinks outside of the box, that isn't trapped inside of the edicts of Wall Street or this uniparty corporate crime syndicate duopoly that's rushing this one world governance directly toward your savings. They're going to steal everything from you so that they can help to accomplish the objectives of a foreign nation state. Land grabs, expansionists, all of these things, the weaponization, the policies that you hate, the transgenderism, the grooming of your kids at school, all of that is stuff that you are funding. They're stealing your resources so that they can put them into initiatives and programs that allow for this subversion to take place. If you want out, if you want to save yourself, if you don't want to fund these things and you want to keep the government's hands off of your money, then you got to go to CortezWM.com and book that appointment with Carlos Cortez right now. CortezWM.com, or you can just call him in the office anytime. Yeah, he does answer his phone. Just call him at 813-448-3446. I'm kind of a fast talker. Let me slow down. 813-448-3446. 813-448-3446. Book that appointment with Carlos Cortez. Very few historical events have taken root in public consciousness like World War II. And of course, no aspect of its remembrance has become more central than the Holocaust. Daily current events are framed within its legacy. Countless articles and propaganda films and books and documentaries and memorials are dedicated to ensuring the world never forgets the Holocaust. Yet, despite the untold sums cumulatively invested by powerful entities to keep this narrative at the forefront, finding authoritative and systematically presented information on the subject remains surprisingly difficult. Why? In a time where skepticism about pretty much everything that we have ever been taught is so rampant that even debates that were thought to be settled millennia ago have reemerged, one would think that the Holocaust, a narrative that is so sacrosanct to the establishment that it's become something of a new religion, whose orthodoxy is so enshrined and held so sacred that the questioning thereof is actually criminalized in many places around the world, that we would have some semblance of a scholarly foundation upon which its altars are built. Some sacred text that its devotees could bolster their faith with, solace themselves with the promise of when the Holocaust heathens rage. But yet, in spite of repetitive assertions that it's the single most well-documented atrocity in all of human history, in all of the thousands of works on this topic, even the most prestigious and celebrated among them are woefully lacking the hard data needed by inquiring minds to navigate the complexities of World War II history. How is it possible that you can go to jail in some countries for so much as just questioning the official death toll at Auschwitz? Yet all of the books that one might turn to in order to fact check these figures, they read more like a morbid catechism than a compendium of actual factual data from which the official narrative could be quickly and easily verified. How many courageous scholars over the years have addressed this elephant in the room at great personal cost? Well, now we have something. Now we have the Holocaust Encyclopedia, the world's first truly and comprehensive and unconstrained encyclopedic work on this embattled topic that offers an unbiased and thoroughly critical analysis of the Holocaust narrative from A to Z. Meticulously researched, examined forensic evidence, allows you to now challenge the widely accepted beliefs surrounding the events of this dark chapter in human history. It invites readers to explore all of the facets of the Holocaust, including overlooked and viciously suppressed perspectives, while fostering an atmosphere of open inquiry that strives to leave no stone unturned or historical document unexamined. Go to HolocaustEncyclopedia.com. Everything from cremation propaganda, absurdities and lies, historical persons, instruments, camps, legal documentation, locations, manipulation, of course. HolocaustEncyclopedia.com. If you put in Stu Likes Books at checkout, you'll get 15% off. HolocaustEncyclopedia.com. Use the promo code Stu Likes Books at checkout for 15% off. This is exactly why we promote the Holocaust Encyclopedia on this network. We're told that this is the most meticulously documented, most horrific event in world history, where a guy called Adolf Hitler just woke up one day and decided to be a genocidal war criminal and murder 6 million people just because he hated them. But, you know, we have this thing called research, and we have these things like aerial reconnaissance photographs where burn pits that we were told existed never existed. You know, during times of war, aerial reconnaissance is a big deal. They take pictures from spy planes and from warplanes so that they can get an advantage over their enemy. And so that's why we promote the Holocaust Encyclopedia on this network. It's why in 1991, the Chicago Tribune actually did an article fixing the numbers at Auschwitz. You got to ask yourself, with the revelations at Auschwitz, was the overall 6 million figure adjusted? No, 5,999,999 would be considered anti-Semitic according to the ADL and Jonathan Greenblatt and all of his Shabbos goys. And that's why it's so central to the conversation. That's why we have Mary Phagan-Kean with us right now, who's, you know, taking the time to relive these horrific events. But why is it so central to the overarching goal of these Jews to go back to Mary Phagan?
Well, I know the rabbi has stated that he feels that he is Leo Frank's rabbi. And that's what his interest is that he is fighting for him as a rabbi. I also believe that he thinks that anti-Semitism was the cause for Leo Frank's conviction. However, that is not accurate information. Like you were saying earlier, the evidence points to a different story than what's being told. And if people don't speak up, they don't get to know what the truth is. And I want the truth to be known about Leo Frank. He was a sexual pervert who raped and murdered a little 13-year-old girl. The case, I have to tell you, I really want people to know this. The case was only here in Georgia. The New York Times only printed 5 articles the entire time of the trial from August 28th to August 25th. That's it. They weren't interested in this case. And do you know why? Because even though all 3 newspapers, the Georgian, the Constitution, and the Journal, had Jewish editors, not one time in the original newspaper accounts is it ever mentioned that Leo Frank was Jewish. What they say is Leo Frank, superintendent of the National Pencil Company. There's no mention of that. After the trial, his rabbi went to New York, and that's how it all started, with the New York people coming in. And then they for the next 2 years, they were just telling horrible stories about the trial, and none of it happened. I'd like you to know that the defense attorneys were very, very, very prominent attorneys here in Atlanta, Rosser and Arnold. They were paid like $15,000 back then. So you know that's millions of dollars today. Do you know what their defense was? Their defense was the black man, Jim Conley, murdered little Mary Phagan. And that's where the racism came in. It wasn't because Leo Frank was Jewish and there was anti-Semitism there. It was because they called Jim Conley a lying, filthy, black, blah, 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 in court. It is in court, in the records, that they called him that. The attorneys did, the defense attorney. Their whole defense was white privilege. And even Leo Frank himself said in a newspaper article that this was the murder of Mary Phagan was not of a white man. It had to only be from a Negro that could have murdered Mary Phagan. So I want people to be aware of that there was a lot of racism, but it was against the black person, Jim Conley and Newt Lee and several other things. The other thing that I think you all need to be aware of is the defense planted evidence. And I'm exposing those plants in my new revision as well. They planted a bloody shirt. They planted the envelope where Mary's paycheck number was written on it. They never did find her handbag. They found an umbrella all of a sudden. I mean, there's a whole chapter for the Leo Frank case. It was written in 1913 or 1914. There's no author. It's just a publishing company. And there's a whole chapter about how the defense planted evidence against Jim Conley.
And this information doesn't get broadcast to the masses.
No.
And there aren't any news articles that want to cover the planted evidence,
No.
of course, which is why you're here. And yeah, we know that we're not the only ones that are suppressed. Of course, you're suppressed as well. But today's times are very interesting because we live in basically the second edition of Weimar Germany. Prolific pedophiles are housed in Israel where they refuse to give them back to any country that has even convicted these people. They won't allow them to be extradited back to their countries and prosecuted. They can just go to Israel. If they are Jewish, they could just go to Israel. As a matter of fact, in America, we pay for their travel back to Israel where they can then be housed and protected. These pedophiles who have been convicted and sentenced, who are just on the lam and are living the life of luxury. We pay for their first-class air travel. We pay for them to be put up in hotels. We give them the money that they need to set up residence in Israel. These people have long protected their own. They have long protected pedophiles. It's the most homosexual nation state on the planet Earth. Israel is the gayest country in the world. So these sexual perverts permeate, and they infect, and they can't get away from it. It's part of their fiber. It's part of their makeup, their biological being. It's in their DNA to rape and to do it to little children. And that's why I think that there is such a fight to prove or try to prove, at least in the court of public opinion, that Leo Frank, in fact, was not a guilty pedophile Jew, but that, in fact, he was a victim of anti-Semitism. And this word that was just completely made up out of whole cloth, just pulled out of thin air. Nobody here hates Jews. We really hate the behavior. And what we've noticed is that there has been generations upon generations of repeated pedophilic behavior, repeated murderous behavior, repeated infiltration and occupation, repeated subversion and subjugation. This is what we have a problem with. And so, but when you talk about this, even when you release a film or you do a documentary or you talk about how people are being maimed and murdered and killed by weapons of biowarfare, for example, those films would be they'd be called anti-Semitic only because they wish to tear down this platform and my voice, because this platform has exploded in popularity. And of course, it's doing a ton of damage to the narrative that comes off of Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv. And they don't like that. And this story, they don't like either.
No, they do not like it. And I'm sure they don't like me, but that's fine with me. I can, I thought about asking the rabbi if he would debate because I know I would win. I know he has not read everything. In order to study the case when the pandemic was here, that was actually a fantastic thing for me because I was able to study the case and go back. And I learned some things through my oral history that Daddy taught me that were in fact true. I had a couple things that I wasn't sure about. So there was two two things that I learned. One was that Leo Frank was not only a sexual pervert with girls, but several boys also testified during the trial. That was a shocker to me. I was surprised because it always said little girls, 20 little girls. And I mean, and I have the names. I have all the research. I have it in the brief of evidence. I have analyzed everything of who said what and how much. And I have all that. And that's, again, that will be in the revision. I'm doing all this stuff to let people know how they turn things around. And no, that didn't happen that way. This is.
Yeah, so that's very important. And I don't just want to gloss over that.
Okay.
What Mary Phagan-Kean just revealed was that this wasn't just some one-off where a group of people got together and said, yeah, the Jew did this. Okay.
No.
That was never even brought up. So do away with the anti-Semitism thing altogether. What you had was just a pervert and a pedophile and a killer who was being put on trial. But at this trial, according to the brief of evidence, because there's no transcript of this trial, it was destroyed and it was hidden away, just like the Epstein files have been destroyed likely and are being hidden away because it has to protect Jews because they can't be outed for the truth, which is that systematically they are overarching, overrepresented by pedophiles in their so-called religious class. But there was dozens of people that testified, including over 10 or 15 victims who had previously been subjected to Leo Frank's sexual perversion and molestation and rape.
True. And also there was, oh gosh, what was her name? Nellie Pettis, I want to say, one of them. One of them was sent to the Cincinnati, Ohio for girls. So you know what that meant. It has been suggested that she was pregnant by Leo Frank. And they brought her back to the trial, but then they decided that the testimony, she never testified, but it was in the newspaper articles about her. So I did do some research on that. I can't find anything that said that she was definitely pregnant, but it's assumed that she was because she was at that particular home for girls. And, you know, at that age, 13 and 14, we can assume, you know, for example, one of the girls had mentioned that he had bit her on her leg. Well, that's another hoax, is that Mary Phagan had bite marks on her breast. And that came out from a guy in the early 20s saying that he found some x-rays of Leo Frank's teeth and all this stuff, Pierre Van Poisson from France, and that never happened. The autopsy report indicates that there were no bite marks. In Governor Slayton's commutation order, as much as the order that he wrote I disliked, he said there was no bite marks on her body. There was no marks in her. The mortician, there was no bite mark. So that's another hoax that they keep bringing up. Oh, she was bitten, and that proves that Leo Frank. That what they do is they come up with all these hoaxes about Mary, and they put it to the point that they try to tear it down and make Mary the victim instead of Leo Frank. And it's Leo Frank that murdered and raped her. In fact, I was called out for saying that he was convicted because he was raped and murdered. Actually, he just was murdered, but she, during the trial, the autopsy report, which most people don't even read. Now that I'm gonna lose it. I'm sorry.
Go
that
ahead.
was the most disturbing thing that I've ever read. To see how she was murdered, to see how she was found. And another part was that even the Governor Slayton and all them and the other people coming out said she was on the blood found in her panties was because of menstrual cycles. Mary was not on her menstrual cycle, according to my grandmother. She had not reached puberty yet. And so that means to me she was not on her menstrual cycle. And my daddy told me that if she was on her menstrual cycle, she would have had specific evidence, such as a piece of cloth with 2 pins in her panties if she was on her menstrual cycle. So she was not. So that's another added component that they do that. They destroy her. And she was only 13. And, they say she's very attractive. She was very beautiful. That is accurate. Yes. And she was very, as my great grandmother said, she was very well built for her age. But they don't tell you that she wasn't allowed to be alone, that my grandfather had to go everywhere she went. When she was doing the Sleeping Beauty pageant, she played Sleeping Beauty. They were chuckling because the prince had to kiss her and all that stuff, and they were laughing about it. And it was kind of cute, but the family didn't leave her alone. The only reason why they left her alone is because they knew she was going to meet some friends. She did not work at the pencil factory in fact, one of the things that Daddy said to me was that she had quit. Well, I could never find out that she didn't quit the pencil factory. But on August 28th, 1913, in the Constitution and the Journal, they mentioned that Mary quit the week before she was murdered. So she didn't see the signs that she was supposed to get her check on Friday. That's why she went on Saturday. And the outfit that she was wearing, I mean, they talk about how do I want to say this? Poor, back country, we were, and that's not accurate either. I mean, the Phagan family had a very good name in Marietta. Her grandfather was a very wealthy, prominent person in Marietta, and I'll show the house in there where they lived in, and I mean, it was just. Even in the newspapers, when Mrs. Phagan, my great-grandmother, came in, they said she's not dressed like a person of poor means. She wasn't. They weren't. I mean, the movie, The Murder of Mary Phagan, she's walking barefoot and all that stuff. Yeah. The family had a good reputation in Marietta, and my great-grandfather had a very good reputation. He was a very wealthy, prominent farmer. And it's just amazing what the things that come out of all these hoaxes that I just blow my mind sometimes. But I have the end of the book. I have an epilogue of every single book in my library, and I check every single one of the hoaxes, such as the bite marks, the anti-Semitism. Oh, they said there was an exodus of Jews when Leo Frank was lynched. Never happened. But this is the narrative, like you say, they keep pushing in the propaganda and all that.
There should have been.
Yeah, there should have been, but there wasn't. That, in fact, the population grew. So that was kind of interesting to find out. And then you find out all these people, how they tell all these, they get all their facts misconstrued. And so I am determined that I am going to be factual in some things I don't like saying in the book, but I did. I felt like it needed to be said from our point of view of how we felt. I will tell you that Tom Watson was a very controversial figure in this case. And, they will always bring that up. That has nothing to do with Mary. Tom Watson was asked to be a defense attorney for Leo Frank, and he turned it down. He didn't want to be involved. They say he was involved in the trial, during the trial. That is not true. He did not get involved in the case until 1914, when New York started printing the newspaper articles, the New York Times and the Chicago newspaper. That's when Tom Watson came in, and that's when literally all hell broke loose, because he just told it like it was, and they were not happy with what he did. And he, as you are well aware of, I mean, Georgia even took down his statue at the Georgia state government offices now.
Don't let the IRS rob you. Where is your money going? Over 4 million government credit cards by federal employees were used to make 90 million transactions with no accountability. DOJ has found $4.7 trillion in federal spending that is untraceable or fraudulent. You work hard to pay your bills, and a significant portion of your money is funneled to thieves and fraudsters through the taxes you pay to the IRS. The IRS wants you to feel powerless. Be a slave that shuts up and give them your hard-earned money. But there is a way out of this slavery. Freedom Law School has been teaching Americans for over 30 years that no law requires 99% of Americans to file and pay income tax. None of their students who have stopped paying have gone to prison or had their bank account or property stolen by the IRS. Go to freedomlawschool.org today to take 7 steps to freedom from IRS deception, robbery, and slavery. For freedom, go to freedomlawschool.org today.
Are you using your phone, or is it using you? Rise above mass surveillance and discover a phone that protects your privacy and communications.
Above Phone does everything your old phone does, without tracking you, while giving you complete control over your phone and apps. We are better than big tech. It works with any cell service. No forced logins, no advertising or tracking. Download apps privately. Control your phone and its apps with secure hardware. Introducing Above Suite. Includes a VPN, private email and calendar, private chats, video calls, internet phone, and a search engine. Don't worry if you're new. Every phone includes a free 45-minute live call. You also get free email and chat support, free guides, and video courses. You have the power.
Rise above with Above Phone.
AbovePhone.com.
You know, it's really important to note that you talk about the way that, you know, Mary was very well put together for her age physically. You know, she was probably, you know, advanced in her physical growth, I guess.
Yes.
And you see that a lot today. And what you see a lot today is, whereas, you know, historically, you know, you just talk about the 1950s, or you see pictures from the 1960s, girls that were well put together, dressed very modestly. And at that time, it was viewed as, you know, I mean, I'll just say it, you were a if you know, went around flaunting your cleavage and all of your other assets, right? I mean, that's just what it was. But today it's encouraged. And our youth today is on places like Instagram, Jewish owned.
Yes.
Places like Facebook, Jewish owned. They go into places like OnlyFans, Jewish owned. Pornhub, Jewish owned. Because this filth and smut started in Weimar, Germany. The godfather of transgenderism, you know, Magnus Hirschfeld, who performed the first, you know, male to female, I guess, transgender surgery, which was botched, of course. The guy died after they tried to plant a uterus in him so he could carry a child. I mean, you have to be one sick Jew to think of some of these things. But it's very important, and it's central to their mission to normalize the sexualization of children, and then to blame the children for the rapes that occur and for the murders that occur. And they did this. They started this in 1913 with Mary Phagan.
Yes, I believe that. They did. And, you know, it's very distraughtful. I mean, you know, because she was a little girl. And, you know, I remember when I was 13, of course, I didn't look like her at 13, but I mean, you know, we used to laugh about that. But, you know, it's just, she was just a very, very beautiful, innocent little girl that went to get her $1.20 pay. By the way, she didn't have to work. And there's one author that
I was going to ask you that if, you know,
she
if
didn't
the
have
family,
to work when she got,
so if the family was so well put together and financially they were set, why was she working exactly?
Well, actually, they moved. My great grandmother got married to Mr. Coleman, and he worked in Atlanta, and so they moved to the house there at Lindsay Avenue, and Daddy told me she couldn't get a seat in school. So that's the reason why she went to the pencil factory. And then she wanted to quit because she did tell things to my great grandmother about things regarding Leo Frank. And so that's in there too as well.
So there were warning signs of this. He was sexually coming on to her and kind of grooming her for all of this before he actually committed the rape and murder.
Every time he went to the bathroom, but he acknowledges that he did never not know who Mary Phagan was. But ironically, he also referred some people to the police detectives that knew Mary well in the community, and that led to them arrest. But Leo Frank didn't know Mary Phagan. That's what he said. I mean, you know, and that's what's being promoted too as another hoax, that he did not know her. And he also changed the times 4 different times, no different. You know, they never bring that out. They never, there's just so much that you could bring out. You could just go
all of the evidence that was presented in this brief that we now have access to, because we can't get the transcripts from the actual trial, so we don't have the totality of the evidence.
No.
But all of the evidence that was presented and that you're pointing to, that we at least now have access to, is overwhelming in and of itself.
Yes, exactly. And that's what happened in 2013 at the 100th anniversary of Mary Phagan. Some people got together and they opened up all the internet and all the so that happened in 2013. So that was really great. That I thought that it was all on. That's how I got all the information. Well, actually, I had it all from when I was little, when I, 15, 16, and 17. I had all those records as well. And any article in the newspaper, I would, I have it. Any magazine, I have it. I mean, it's just, I was just a collection. And by the way, I would like your audience to know that I have donated my collection of 57 years through the John Mitchell Foundation to Georgia State University, and they have all my documentation, all of it, which includes all the microfilm fish of all the newspaper articles because they were being destroyed. I have every single original article in that collection from the Atlanta Constitution, from the day she was murdered until the day that Leo Frank was lynched. Those I have the Tom Watson magazines in there, which you cannot find anymore. They've either been destroyed or they're being hidden. So I felt a very strong. The generational trauma needs to stop with me. My nephew is helping, but I just want it to stop. And I felt like the family felt like it was a good thing to do to protect the integrity of that collection because it has the truth in it. And the newspaper articles, if you don't read every single one of those, then you have no right in my book.
How dangerous do you think it is?
I mean,
from your perspective, I would just like to know how dangerous do you think it is that the current sitting president of the United States was paid $250 million. His administration was bought and paid for. $250 million from AIPAC and another $230 million, almost $500 million from Jews. Elon Musk is Jewish. There was 230 million and then another 250 straight from AIPAC itself. Now he wants to primary Thomas Massie, the only guy that I can see in our federal government that has taken $0 from AIPAC. And they want to primary him and get him out of there because he's standing in the way. He's kind of, a microcosm of what we are here and the greater movement of truth. He's standing in the way. And now Donald Trump and the Department of Justice, rather than doing what they should do, which is release these Epstein files, they're playing all these games with these Epstein files. And now, instead of that, the DOJ is focused on crushing people that they perceive to be anti-Semitic. They're going and they have an anti-Semitism task force, and they're physically sending stormtroopers, cops out there to physically just smash people who are considered to be anti-Semites if they're there, opposing a genocide and war crimes that are being taken place as hundreds of thousands of children are just blown away and completely bombed. How dangerous is the current political climate in our country as it furthers this anti-Semitic cloak of protection around people who commit heinous crimes like the one that eventually led to the rape and murder of Mary Phagan?
That's a difficult question for me because I had Jewish grandparents. And of course they believed that Leo Frank was guilty. I will tell you that. So not everybody that is of that religion believes that he's innocent. It's just that we have a political machine here in Georgia with the former governor. He didn't come into the case until 2015. He didn't start doing anything, but the rabbi's been doing it since 1995. And I mean, the things he has done is incredible. Billboard signs, all this stuff. It's, during it's just really amazing the things that he has done. That I don't understand when he has no relation. He has no business doing this. And neither, they're just going, it reminds me of the good old boy Georgia system where they're in the background and they're all smoking the cigars and talking and doing the deals. And that's what Governor Barnes has done for the rabbi. And
that's what our entire government apparatus is about right now. That is a perfect depiction of what the United States government has become at every level.
Exactly.
And state governments and local governments.
Yeah, and this is what's happening here in Georgia. Governor Barnes has got his finger in it, and he's got Fonnie Willis, who, is in charge of the Incentives Project. Ironically, we have a Georgia Senate committee that you should be aware of that just started, and they are investigating Fonnie Willis for open records. And I've written a letter and asked for them to look at my case because they denied me my open records to the case. They said there was no open records for the rabbi, the governor, and all these people that worked in the conviction integrity unit. They met in secret, and in 2019, and here's the kicker, on April 26th, now what day is that? The day that Mary was murdered, they had a big press conference announcing the conviction integrity unit to exonerate Leo Frank of the murder of little Mary Phagan. Yeah. On the day that she was murdered, they announced it. Yep. And I was just so shocked and so hurt
These
that they
people
would do
know
that.
no decency.
No.
They have
It's-
no shame.
No.
The hubris is just unfathomable to anybody who has a soul.
Yeah, they don't have souls. And I really believe that about the rabbi and governor. Now what's interesting is the governor is Fani Willis's attorney for the Georgia Senate Committee. Isn't that wonderful? So I want to know how much it's going to cost and why isn't the governor and the rabbi going to be paying for it? Why are we spending? We need a Doge for the Atlanta Fulton County DA's office. Of course, she's in trouble anyway with the Trump stuff and the January 6th committee stuff, and that she just had to pay $22,000 to the Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, for not releasing the records. But yeah, they told me there weren't any records. University of Georgia, when I asked for their records, told me they had 80. They had 80 emails, 80 email records or 80 records and emails and all that records. And I waited a month and waited and I gave my money and did all this stuff. Then all of a sudden I asked for them again and they said that they were incorrect, that they don't exist.
Yeah, I don't think that we need a Doge anywhere. I think that
clean.
what we do need is a militant army of Christians and Americans who will stand up as patriots and make sacrifices for their country, which is completely occupied, and oust this government that is completely infiltrated and replace it with one that's representative of the people. Only then will we see real justice, when people are willing to make sacrifice and come forward, to put on the armor of God.
To make that sacrifice to come forward.
And that's very well proven.
I've never done that before, and I think you know that. I've never.
Where do you? I know that you haven't. Where do you want to direct people, Mary?
To my website, littlemaryphagan.com. I have every single newspaper article on there. I have the brief evidence on there. I have all my newsletters that you could see the battles that we've been going through since the governor and rabbi have been doing all this. Information is all there, and I don't know what else to do except just expose the fact that he does not deserve to be exonerated for the murder of my great aunt Mary Phagan.
Hell no, he doesn't.
I agree. Hell no. I guess
absolutely
I could say that
not.
But
Mary Phagan-Kean,
he should not be. But if it happens, I'll be very sad. But I will never. Oh, I did put my own marker up on the grave. I forgot to tell you that. After they took their graves down in 2016, I put my own marker because everybody was still alive, and I was told that it was not best to do that until they were all gone. So I did. And I talked about her, how she was a beautiful little girl, brown hair, dimples, blue eyes. She played, she was pretty, she went to go get her pay. She never came home. So the other thing that I wanted to mention to you, the other hoax is the Knights of Mary Phagan. I want to get this one out. There were no Knights of Mary Phagan, and the rabbi and Barnes constantly promote that. There were no Knights of Mary Phagan. That came out 6 weeks in the newspapers in the New York Times before Leo Frank was lynched. And they called themselves the Vigilance Committee. And it's in all the documentation that I have. Vigilance Committee is what they called themselves. These were very, very, very well-known people that did this. Very well-known people. And I knew
they
when
just
I wrote my
changed
book,
the events completely. They change the people involved. They make up scenarios out of whole cloth. Well, you know what? Similar to weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's just, and they were quiet for a long time. And when I wrote my book, my first book, I knew who the members of the Vigilance Committee were. And my father did too. And I said, are we going to release it? And we decided not to, because we knew that some family members did not know that their family member was part of that vigilance group. And we did not think it was our right and responsibility to let them know. But they found me. Eventually in 2003, Steve Oney listed them all. So, and they're the same names I have. But I didn't, Steve Oney, that was his goal, to list them. And we weren't out to make money. We just want people to know our story. That's what we want. And,
and they can get that story at littlemaryphagan.com. Unfortunately, due to network restrictions, we're up against a hard break right now. We're on DirecTV and Dish Network. We want to make sure that we stay within those parameters so that this can air in its entirety. So we want people to go to littlemaryphagan.org .com, excuse me, littlemaryphagan.com. And please go check out these writings, and please be loud about this everywhere. Mary Phagan-Kean, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And I just want to correct that and make sure that I really pound this in there. littlemaryphagan.com. Can I get it right? littlemaryphagan.com. My gosh. What is going on over here? I mean, this is just also mind-blowing, but it's not surprising at all. Completely rewriting history and completely rewriting who is the actual victim here and who is the actual perpetrator of a horrific crime. And they will go out of their way to demonize and taint the image of a 13-year-old little girl, an innocent girl whose childhood innocence was murdered, along with her physically. That's how far these sick and deranged people will go at the ADL and groups like the ADL, how far Jonathan Greenblatt and the rest of these Jews that control the media industrial complex will go. They will taint and tarnish the reputation and the life of a now deceased 13-year-old little girl who was brutally raped and murdered in ways that are unfathomable to any parents out there who have a little girl like I do. And they should never be allowed to be in public comfortably without being approached with the truth. These people are demons, they are among us, and they must be ousted.
Done.
So RFK Jr. is heading up Health and Human Services, and of course we have Elon Musk, who's heading up DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, looking into all of the unnecessary spending. How about we look into spraying the skies with poison? How about we look into weather modification? Yeah, it's not a secret anymore. We've all seen them spraying the skies. You can go outside and see the perfectly crisscrossed patterns. This mysterious fog that appeared, you guys remember that? People were just getting sick all over the place. Bioweapons being sprayed in the sky. We've seen graphene oxide samples, and now deadly bacteria is found in this deadly fog. You're getting poison everywhere. And so, of course, the old playbook is make it impossible to get real treatments that actually help you and instead push you to big pharma, scare the hell out of you, and make you go get a deadly injection. No, not anymore. Remember ivermectin? It was hard to get to. Remember hydroxychloroquine? It was hard to get to. Doxycycline, dexamethasone, all of the things that actually treated people that were demonized by the murderous press. It's all available right here, right now, in the emergency kit that I've been telling you about. Get the ivermectin, get the hydroxychloroquine, the dexamethasone, get it all right here in this travel size case. It's ready to go. Guidebook for safe and easy use inside of this thing, putting urgent care right at your fingertips. Plus, it includes the immunity-boosting Z-Sac nutraceutical, giving your body the extra defense that it needs on the daily, whether it's a sudden bacterial infection or a bioweapon attack, maybe a respiratory illness or something more severe. The Z-Kit has you covered. The purchasing process is fully digital. All it takes, just fill out a quick little digital form. Within 1 to 2 weeks, your kit arrives at your front door, just as mine did at mine. Don't let illnesses and bioweapons catch you off guard. Order your Z-Kit right now at the famous zstackprotocol.com. Go to zstackprotocol.com and then use code SPN to save up to $48 plus get free shipping. Up to $48 off plus free shipping for this. It was hard to get ivermectin, remember? It probably will be again. Hydroxychloroquine, dexamethasone, doxycycline, all of these things are included right here, plus a guide for safe use. Go to zstackprotocol.com and use the promo code SPN. $48 off plus free shipping, and because we're America first and America only, it's available to American residents only. zstackprotocol.com. I'm going to ask you for your undivided attention because I'm going to tell you about what could possibly be the most important life-saving supplement that I have ever talked about. It's called Cardio Miracle. Each serving of Cardio Miracle has a combination of over 50 high-quality ingredients, including a huge variety of fruits, vegetables, amino acids, and herbs, all of which come together to promote your body's ability to produce nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is so important for heart health. It helps to relax and dilate your blood vessels, which supports blood flow and circulation. And I love that you don't have to take this giant pill to get all of this nutrition. No, Cardio Miracle comes in a powder formula, so it's really easy to mix all day throughout the day into juice or water and take it at any time. That also helps to support mood regulation because it's a neurotransmitter. It's a neuromodulator in the brain. So it can support the release of serotonin and dopamine, both of which are really important and involved in mood regulation. Cardio Miracle also supports mental clarity, sleep quality, energy levels. It can even help with recovery after exercise. Nitric oxide is essential for so many functions in the body, and Cardio Miracle supports the production of nitric oxide, so you get many benefits from just one supplement. Please go to highpowerheart.com. Again, highpowerheart.com. I'm telling you, This could quite possibly be the most important supplement that I will ever talk about. Cardio Miracle. Go to highpowerheart.com.
AirWaterHealing.com is the leading manufacturer in filterless air purification systems. Whether you're dealing with pollen or mold or dust, shedding from your pet or vaccinated neighbors, mRNA spike protein shedding. AirWaterHealing.com has solutions for every scenario at home, at work, or on the go. Breathe with confidence. Don't let your air suck. Rest well knowing that your home is protected 24/7. So now you can get a unit for your home or a portable unit for on-the-go travel. That's airwaterhealing.com. Use promo code STEW for 10% off when you go to airwaterhealing.com.